Hey, on this episode of As Goode as It Gets, the podcast, we're going to talk more about living to work and not working to live, and then I quit.
All while having a whole lot of fun.
Cue the music. Hi, and welcome back to As Goode as It Gets, the podcast, Season 1, Episode 8.
I'm Cris.
And I'm Mikey.
And welcome to our virtual kitchen table where we are chit-chatting and letting you guys know a little bit about our story.
Yep. Again, this first season is all about us. Just so y'all can get to know us better, know where we started and how we got to where we're at. And where we are right now is a business meeting, as we called it, a business trip, if you will.
Yes.
Cris comes to me and says, I've got goals. And oh, that's what it was. That's what you said. You said, I have goals.
And you're one
that
of
I
them.
said, and you're one of them. And I thought, oh no, now I'm a project. And I was. And she said, I know you like doing your YouTube stuff. And I really think that you've got something there if you want to develop it, but it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of work. And I think that we should spend a lot of time this next year working on that very thing. So now we're up to 2016 or getting there. No, we're right at the end of 2015 with the goals, and 2016 comes around and we go on a trip.
Yes.
You and I think we'd been on one trip together, just me and you, with no miss ad.
That was a blog conference.
And it was a blog conference. It really wasn't a vacation or anything. We were constantly going to classes and different seminars and stuff like that. So, but this was a getaway for us, but it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work.
Oh, it was about setting business goals. We had materials we were going through, and
we didn't know. We knew that we wanted to develop something on the channel. We just did not know what it was. We didn't know if it was going to be skits, if it was going to be comedy, if it was going to be music. It was just going to be something. And 'cause I'd been playing around, doing little edited videos and stuff and putting background music to it and kind of learning the ropes on, what kind of music can you use, what, copyright stuff, and, just kind of having fun a little bit with effects and stuff like that. But I did not know where. I knew I wanted to do something, but I didn't know where to take it.
Right.
And so.
And because it was a part of my goals, we decided that at least part of the channel was going to somehow connect back to Recipes at Crock.
Right.
Because one of the big things about Recipes at Crock is that it's a place for recipes that everybody can cook. It's not, you don't have to have mad cooking skills to make something super yummy. And so that's kind of always been our premise, is that, we're going to step you through the steps no matter what level. If you're a great cook, that's fantastic. Here's some yummy ideas as a springboard. We would hear from a lot of people that they didn't feel like they were all that great of cooks, but through the recipes that they were finding on the site, that it was helping them.
Right.
To prepare better meals, or that they were getting over some of those things that had been said to them all those years that they couldn't cook, because that with some of our simple recipes, they could really do some cool things. They found
that they really could.
Yeah.
I know that. Well, I didn't know that yet about me.
Right. Well, so one of the ways that we thought, okay, because I think someone had suggested to me that maybe what we could do for the YouTube channel would be like for you to taste the recipes to tell people whether or not they were good or not. And we played around with that, and then it's like, but no, like it would be really cool, instead of like having me in the kitchen telling everybody how to do everything.
Why not put this clumsy fool in front of a camera?
No, have somebody who wasn't as comfortable in the kitchen.
Right. And if you watch the first few videos, I was not comfortable. Hey, I am a ham. I've always been a ham, and I can entertain, but the minute that camera was turned on to me for the first time, I was like,
yeah.
Hello. And welcome back to Cooking Chris's Dishes.
Well, and terrified. Not only that, it's like, okay, the things that I would say, like, okay, well, just mix that in. And you would go about it in the way it wasn't. You were learning as you went, and I was learning how to help you as we went too. And so that was kind of our thing.
But going back, we take our trip. We went to the Keys, I think it was the first trip. Yeah, because it was at Duck Key, and we sat next to the pool, and for hours, because remember it was really windy.
Yes.
It's been windy there since October. That we heard everybody said the same thing.
Everybody kept saying it's been windy since
I'd never
October.
been to the Florida Keys, and
Like,
I'd always wanted to
okay.
go there. We're like, let's where we'll do our trip. So we go down to this resort, and we sit by the pool, and we're freezing because it's like the highs were like 65, but the wind was blowing across the Gulf into the Atlantic, and it's freezing cold. But we sat there for hours and hours, wrapped in towels, and wrote. And I wrote pages of ideas. Anything from, I remember one of them was Giblet Whacker, and it was just a video from Addie's point of view because she was still little, and like in her hitting me in the giblets with a bat because I thought that was funny.
That did not make the cut.
It didn't make the cut. But then one of the other ideas, and it's an idea I'd had. In fact, there's a video in I think in the originals and the tunes and originals is cooking with Good Old Boy, and that's something that was a funny video that I'd been wanting to make forever. And it was me constantly screwing up dishes in the kitchen. It was just like it was a staged slapstick. Yeah, it was a 3-scene bit because I love slapstick. You can't stand slapstick.
He loves slapstick.
And if it's Three Stooges kind of stuff, I'm all over it.
But lots of ideas. The bottom line.
But then one of the ideas that was written down in the journal, and I wish I could find that journal because there was a lot of good ideas in there. But the one that really stuck out was, what about cooking your dishes? Like, yeah, we talked about what if I was the one that cooked the dish on there, and you would add commentary or tell me what I'm messing up or whatever. And so what would we call it? And I'm like, cooking Chris's dishes. And it rolled off the tongue. I was like, ooh, that's a good idea. And so of all the ideas that we wrote down, that was the one that really stuck. We come home and we start taping. And we did, I don't know how many recipes we did that first time, but the rum chata was on there. I couldn't say rum chata to save my life.
No, it was hilarious.
The Mississippi beef roast was on there. The oatmeal was another one. But if you watch those first few, we were trying to figure out cameras and lighting and angles and sound. And I look back at them now, and it's like, man, I could do that so much better. But I don't want to take them down because the view counts are good on them, and so I wouldn't take them down. But it's like when you first start doing something,
creating anything.
Well, that's just like this podcast. Who knows what we're going to look like if we keep this podcast up? We're going to look back at this podcast and go,
be a disaster.
Yeah. We really should have done better. Excuse me.
But you got to learn somehow.
But we come home and we start taping. And then I realize that it's not just, we'll tape it and I'll put it on YouTube. There's a lot of editing. There's adding, make sure the sound's not too high, too low. And then I was working with lighting, both, we were trying different lighting. In fact, we've got a macaroni and cheese recipe.
Oh my gosh.
That makes it look like I'm getting a tan.
Well, it was completely blown out. The entire bit. We should redo that video.
We really should because it was a good recipe,
awful.
But the lighting was horrible.
Yeah.
I was blind. I was blind for like a day after that.
Right.
And so we learned, how to use ring lights, and we learned that even after, if you want to brighten it up, you can do it in post through the editing software and things like that. But it took a lot of time. Then there was, you got to add the music. Do you want to split to another clip from something else? Do you want to do this? Do I need to, and you got to watch the whole episode and like if there's a blooper that you want to cut out or then use at the end. Then we started realizing that later that bloopers at the end were a good thing. And then your computer would go down, so you had to get a new computer because you were blowing that one up because you're using all the time. And I was in a spot where I was working and I started shutting off the overtime because I couldn't do the overtime that was constantly offered. I couldn't work the overtime plus my regular 40 hours. And then I would come home And we would record. There were weekends where we would record like 5 or 6 episodes.
Right.
And we went and I'm thinking like, oh, well, we'll put up a recipe maybe, once every 2 weeks. That was not your schedule.
No.
Your schedule is we're going to put up a recipe every other day.
Well, no, that was when we were putting up 2 recipes a week plus doing auxiliary content.
Yeah. There was like funny stuff,
Right.
because we were trying. We were putting different poles in the
Right.
water to see where the fish caught.
Right.
And the Cooking Chris's dishes is what really took off. That's what people
Right.
responded to. That's where a lot of our Crock Posse came from.
Right.
Naturally.
Right.
And our subscribers started to come up a lot. I started when we launched the first video, I had 77 subscribers. And then I like going back through old Facebook posts of different times because it'll show like your Facebook will show your memories. And I had taken pictures, when I hit 100. I was like so excited when I hit 100 subscribers. And then 100 turned into 2, turned into 5. And then I got to 1,000 and I was like, oh my gosh, we have something here. This is really good. And then the view counts went up, and not just the view counts, but then people were interacting with us.
Right.
Which also led to trolls would come in and say, and I remember my first troll that commented on one of our videos. And those of you, hopefully you know what it is, but if you don't know, people that get on there and just say mean things.
Right.
And I remember the first person that got on there and said something mean, and I didn't know what to do with it because nobody had ever done that before. And I was like,
well, to you, I mean, on the website,
yeah.
they'd been doing it.
Yeah, but I mean, it was foul language and just rude. And I stalked him.
Oh
I
my
did.
goodness!
I went and found out who he was and found out I didn't really care.
No.
But beyond that, there was so much work involved because then there was like you got to reply to people when they respond, and what do you do about the trolls? And you find out you get rid of them, you block them, don't let them be a part of this, and because you want to protect the people that you do love that really are a part of this, that really became part of the Crock Posse. And then there's the editing, and then there's the uploads, and then there's the releases and the launches and everything. And it was a full-time job in itself. So I was working 8 hours at work,
Yes.
9 altogether by the time you got done with everything. And then I would come home and sit down. And now it's about 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, about midnight. And I would edit and would spend 2 to 3, sometimes 4 hours working on that. And then I'd crash and then get up and do it all over again. And then on the weekends we would run.
Right.
Run around and spend time as a family. I was leading worship at church.
Right.
And which was practices and, multiple services. And then we get done with church, come home and record more episodes.
Right.
So pretty much we were working 8 days a week and I was working about 27 hours a day.
Right.
And I'm, expounding a little bit. We got some rest, but I was working nonstop.
It was crazy.
I was working your hours pretty much. And that's all we did.
Right.
And we did that for
A really long time.
well, we did it for before we really started talking about it, we did it for about a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And the first year that we did it, we launched in February of 2016. Mm-hmm. We relaunched the channel. And then somewhere between January and February of last year of 2017. Yeah, because that was last year now. Mm-hmm. We took another trip and rebranded once again to relaunch it to
like hone things in.
Yeah, to kind of give it an overhaul and to kind of really give it a face, you know. And our subscribers at that time, I think we might have reached about 7,000. 7,000 to 8,000, I think it was. So our subscribers had taken off. We had formed relationships with these people, and a lot of them were like our online friends. And we're like, and in my head, I'm like, we are really, between your blog and what the YouTube channel had started to become, we really had something going there.
Right.
And I knew that the channel was relying a lot on the backing of Recipes the Crock and your subscribers to come over and to build on my side.
Right.
But I was like, we could really keep going with this. This should be my job. So we flirted with the discussion of of actually making this a full-time job for me.
Right.
And there were many discussions. A lot of them at the beginning were, no, that's not going to happen, because I still carried the insurance,
right,
the retirement,
right,
the everything that working for a corporation will get you.
right.
And I was making really good money.
Right.
Railroaders make great money. And so, but at the same time, we were working constantly.
Right. And the only time, like, we would try and do family breakfast on the weekends.
Yep.
So that we could kind of like, okay.
Which was all pancakes and eggs and biscuits and gravy and
but
hot
still,
chocolate.
It was everybody's phones are away, everybody's focused, and the family spends time together. And then then we tried to take, at that time, probably 2 or 3 vacations.
Yeah.
And truly that was because we never
saw each other.
We were just working.
We worked together. We were coworkers in what we were doing, but we never really, other than maybe one day a week, if we were lucky, we would spend time as a family. We would spend time as a couple. We'd spend time as parents to our kid.
Right.
But more often than not, it was like sprinkled in over, we're either taping or editing or you're writing.
Things were not in balance.
No. And so, people were giving me all kinds of bunk at work because, I would burn all of my vacation and all of my personal days and try to take 2-week vacations every time at least twice a year, if not 3 times if I could get away with it. And we would go to Disney. Right. And kept going to Disney. And everybody's
that truly was like, that was our family time for the year.
It was.
And everything was going towards that. But at the same time, again, some of these other forces were at work of, okay, is it really worth spending all the other weeks of the year burning yourself at both ends to take 4 weeks of the year and go do this like recharge thing, which was really awesome and we really, really loved. Yeah. But like, do you really want to only be living 4 weeks of your life? Yeah. Like, or do you want something more? And so we started down the path of, okay, we're going to use 2017 to be a transition year.
Well, in 2016, I gained 70 pounds over the course of a year. Right. And it was and it wasn't just because I was starting to cook your dishes, because I was eating your dishes all the time. But here my wife has this extremely successful blog that the only way to know if the recipes are good or not is if the family will eat it, and I would eat it. Yeah. I was working for the railroad, coming straight home and editing videos for an entire year. So I would work, 12, 14 hours every single day. On the weekends, you didn't want to exercise. That was just taboo because you're supposed to rest. So your day of rest was you go out to eat, whatever you wanted, go to the movies, eat popcorn candy, and drink full-on sodas. I was drinking a copious ton of beer, and I got sick, pretty much. Yes. And gained a lot of weight, found out, that's when we found out about the sleep apnea thing.
Right. And so we were in the mode of, okay, let's slowly transition. Yeah. And so in part of that, you had what, a 20-year addiction to chew tobacco.
I chewed. If I was awake, I had a dip in my mouth pretty much.
So we're like, okay, if we're going to go and like give up premium health insurance and retirement and everything else and kind of try and see what this is going to be like. 1, we got to get healthy. Yep. 2, we've got to figure out how all this is going to work. And I keep hitting that. Sorry. We've got to lose weight. We've got to figure out the tobacco thing. We've got to figure out life balance. And so we did start to pull back on the YouTube channel and not go 7 days a week because, again, you were in the emergency room. I mean, we talked about that earlier,
Right.
In an
First
earlier episode. Yeah, you ended up in the emergency room with chest pains, and you couldn't breathe, and so we clearly were cutting things way too close. So we needed to pull things back.
So when I think of 2017, I think that was the year I quit. And it was the year that I quit chewing.
Yes.
It was the year that I don't want to say I quit sugar because I like sugar. I'll still drink things with sugar in them. I like to eat cake, but...
You quit not paying attention to sugar.
In, what was it, in February or March is when we really said, we're going to try, and you had studied and read up on low carb.
No, I didn't do that until June.
That was June?
Yeah.
Oh, that makes me feel even better because I lost that weight quicker. Okay, so in February 27th of 2017,
yes,
I can even tell you it was about 5:30 in the afternoon, even halfway through a shift, and that was a bad time to quit. But I quit dipping. I spit out my last one. Gross, I know, I'm sorry, but I did. I got rid of it and didn't chew ever again. And then what I didn't do was realize how hard that was going to be. And so I went like an entire day and a half where I didn't have any nicotine in me, and I was shaking, I was mad, I was irritable, and I remember I packed, my food, like snacks and lunch and all that, and I ate it within like the first 2 hours I was at work because I just constantly, I had to chew on something.
Right.
And so then when I ran out of food, it turned into people's hides. And so I went and I stopped by a Walgreens and I got some gum, and that has helped me ever since. And so I quit chewing.
Yep.
And then we're working harder and harder and harder. And, we're trying to pump out 2 recipes a week on the channel. Mm-hmm. We're doing a weekly chat. Mm-hmm. Plus, I'm still wanting to have the fun stuff.
We started doing some live content.
Yeah, we did live content. We did the church song Sundays, and then later on, we started doing the work week wind downs all on YouTube. We've switched those now over to Facebook for anybody that's interested.
Yes.
Join, and we'll also again leave a link down below to our Facebook group that you can join, where we do the live content, as well as where you can stay updated with the stuff that we're on all the adventures that we're doing. But we're putting out more and more content. We're growing the channel.
Right.
We're growing, and not just the channel, but our Crock Posse is fully named. We're selling T-shirts and sweatshirts and mugs and stuff like that. We really built this into a business.
Right.
And and that was one of the agreements was you can't quit work till you quit chewing.
Right.
And I wanted to be done where we had to be done for a year, we thought.
Right.
Because we looked into outside insurance, and one of the one that we had found, they said that you had to be tobacco free for at least 12 months.
Right.
And
so we were on that trajectory and trotting down that path of, okay, by February of 2018, we want to transition to you quitting the railroad.
Yep.
That's what we had planned.
February, the end of February, beginning of March of 2018.
Say about plans.
Yeah, best laid plans. But that was the plan by March 1 was to be done. And then as the year moves on my side with the railroad, we have a new CEO takeover.
Yes.
And with a new CEO comes a lot of changes. It was a big shakeup. And now my job was never in jeopardy. I mean, I was put on a much tighter leash along with everybody else and how we handled our jobs. But
there, not jeopardy, but there was a lot of constant uncertainty. And not in a way... And not in any way of anything that was going to be resolved. It was just a constant state of which way is the floor going to move now.
Yeah, and I had bosses that absolutely did not know what to do or who to talk to because everybody was getting fired. If you were in management, you were terrified. You were either working 24 hours, 7 days a week and killing yourself, or you were terrified you were going to get fired.
It was a confusing time. And then on top of that, there were rumors and then established statements at one point that your job was going to get moved
out of state.
Out of state.
And that... because we thought there's no way that's not going to happen. The office that I'd worked out of had been there for years, even before this company had taken over that portion of the railroad. It'd been there for years. It wasn't going anywhere. We owned the building.
But with that, you could say that all you wanted, but the uncertainty was still there. And then on top of that, we have this kind of looming, you had the, visit to the ER that had kind of like shook us a little bit of, okay, we're not going to let work stress get us out. Yep. I had even had, I had my own kind of, we need to be assessing what it is we're trying to accomplish here. And so we began to think, well, one, like, we're not going to let the railroad dictate what was going to happen to us, because we had already planned on leaving.
And I had always said, because in the railroad, if you want to advance, more than likely you have to move. And I had peaked. I was still in a union craft in a job that I knew I was never going to have to move for. If I went into management, I knew I'd have to. So I'd been approached many times by many people way above me that said, "Hey, I'd love for you to come work for me." And I said, "I'll never move. I will move for my family. I will never move for a job. Right. And I'm definitely never going to move for this company because it's never, it's not concrete. Your career is never concrete when you're in management. You could be let go at any time. New people come in, you could be fired for sneezing the wrong direction." And I watched it happen. And whenever they said, there were rumors, because there's always a rumor before the actual wave of truth comes through. There were rumors. Well, there's a possibility that they're going to move the office. And we're like, oh my gosh, does that mean we're going to move to Florida or Atlanta or, Chicago? There were so many rumors going around. And when there's that big flurry of rumors, everybody's worked up now. It's not just like you're worked up and stressed out about the job.
There was no rest from it or just ability to just do your job. Right. Because everything, even when you weren't at work, there was the constant flow of what's going to happen from everybody, and rightfully so. I mean, everyone was, and to some degree is what, like, when your future is kind of being, because it's not just the future of the people who are working, it was their families and their kids and where everybody was going to go to school and what house you were going to live. I mean, there's so many factors, and it was all constantly in flux at the same time as these health issues, at the same time as we had lots of growth in my business. And it just became one of those moments of, you know what are we really sticking around for? Because the other piece was that there was some opportunities for me to do some business travel. But like someone still has to be with Addie.
Right.
And so it was just like, okay, we can either make the decision to stick this out and see which way the wind blows with the railroad and all the emotional toll. Because it wasn't just what was happening to us. It was what was happening to your friends. Yeah. Because we always kind of knew where we were headed, and that like we could say no because we had already had a plan and we were already working a plan for you to quit. But there are a lot of people who didn't have choices. Yeah. That it was just really hard to be there on the front row watching everybody getting kind of whipped around. Just the person that works on the railroad, a lot of us had spouses. Right. And, those spouses have jobs here and businesses here. And, there's the railroaders weren't the only successful ones. A lot of them that had spouses also had successful businesses established here in Indiana. It would be the same as trying to get like me to take things while a lot of my stuff is online. But anyhow, so we made the decision, you know what? We're going to say enough is enough.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of how I think it was when they had sent out a letter that said all the offices will be moved by October.
Right.
And we didn't think, there was any way in the world that the timeline would be that fast until we got that letter. Then everybody's like, oh my gosh, and this was like in the beginning of the summer. So there's not that much time. So people started putting their houses for sale. People started buying property down in Florida, and it wasn't just in our office. It was all over the place, and of course there's Facebook groups where all these dispatchers are all talking. And so and it was all rumor mill, nothing concrete. So everybody's reacting on rumor, and the environment got worse and worse.
Right.
And I was watching people who I had worked with over the course of 17 years, people who I had worked for 17 years that were fired for different reasons or left because, the stress became so much because this new system of management that came in was really rough. And so I was watching people that they were definitely living to work. They were living to hang on to a job, or there were possibilities for some of them to advance for sure under new management, and they were working
That's their lives.
Right.
We came to the decision for our lives that was not what we wanted.
But I saw that,
Yes.
and that's what I mean is I saw that and went, I can't do that. There's no way I can do that, and I can't move for that.
No. Well, moving, we had discussed moving.
Well, even if it was a short term though, because remember
Right.
we had said that we weren't gonna quit until March.
Right.
All of a sudden, the railroad's gonna move us, 1,000 miles away.
Exactly. And we were talking about temporarily moving. We sat down with Addie and had some discussions. And and honestly, one morning you woke up and you had a very strong gut reaction that we should not move.
I did.
And in the second that happened, we decided.
Yeah.
You know what?
There was a time where we talked about like, okay, well, let's, first we weighed the pros and cons of, moving to Florida versus Indiana. And of course on Addie's con list was alligators, crocodiles, snakes.
That might have been fed by her father to her. But anyhow.
My con definitely was we were going to move away from our families.
Right.
And we were going to move away from our church family. And
Yes.
all of which were huge factors in the no column.
But we ended up realizing it didn't matter. Like, we could still control what happened to us.
Yep.
So we made the decision to just, whatever they decided, we were going to bump up our timeline to get out of a toxic environment.
Yep.
Is what it boils down to. And it was toxic for us.
Yep. We decided to bump up the timeline, and we didn't know when that would be, and then I think on a whim I came up with, hey, what about October 1? And because we had
said a whim. You know what happened is he calls me when he's at work with the form in front of him saying, I just filled out this form and it says my last day is October 1,
Well,
and I'm about to hit enter.
I want
is what he said.
I want to backtrack on that though, because this was before the move was going to happen. But I really knew that I didn't want to be there. And we had went on our one day that we always take off, and as a family day, we call that our Sabbath. It's our rest day. It's where we don't blog, we don't tape, we don't do anything. We spend time as a family. We spend time with Addie, and we go to the movies usually, or go to the park. And it was either right before or right after the movie, and we ended up in Barnes & Noble. And we run into a really good friend who his wife has been a best friend of mine ever since we were little kids. And Andy Janning, we hadn't seen him in a long time, and we just ran into him because he's a big book nerd too.
We seem to always run into him and his family at Barnes & Noble.
Well, they're book nerds too.
Yes.
And I bet you they read more than Super Fudge. But we run in, I hear Cris cackling, talking to somebody like, who in the world is she talking
who's she
to?
talking to? She's
and
reading.
I see this tall, good-looking, redheaded dude with a beard. He had a beard. I was so happy.
Gosh.
And Andy had recently quit his job to start his business, and he was flourishing and still is. And
not recently, several years prior.
But here in the past couple of years, he's really taken off, and we started talking, and I think he knew my heart, and we were talking. He was like, "Hey, we see the channels growing. That's really cool." I'm like, "Yeah, we got this whole railroad thing, and and we want to build the other one up. I don't even know how the conversation kept going, but it was like, we really want to build it up more, but I think I'm going to stay with the railroad, because at the time we were talking about buying a new house or building a house. I wanted property.
By we, he means him.
I mean me, because I still want a big piece of property. I always did. I just want some place to cut down trees. I don't know why. Anyway,
right out there.
Andy's like, you could keep working. Again, you could keep living to work, and if once you get the house, you're going to want this, and once you get that, you're going to want that. You got to look beyond the material things, because when you buy that big house and you buy that new car and you do this, are you wanting success or status? And I honestly don't care about status. I really don't. I'm a nerd and I'm cool. I'm a band geek, and that's the only status I need. I'm popular with my family.
I think ultimately Andy was reiterating things to you that your wife had told you.
But the way the way he said it, though, he planted a major seed of
sure that it was possible.
I could ride on my skills as a railroader for the rest of my career and be good at it and provide great for my family. But I would have to cap my creative side. I'd have to, because I couldn't do both. It was clear.
Right. We were.
And it was killing me. And I think I was telling him that too. I'm like, it's work on both ends. He's like, well, why don't you quit one and do the other? Why don't you are a creative person. And as a creator, if you don't create, you're not just shorting yourself, but you're shorting the world of your creation.
Right.
And you could really develop this. And he's a great speaker. And I'm sitting there like I'm standing in front of Tony Robbins, and Tony Robbins is telling me, you can do it. I don't know if that's the way Tony Robbins says it.
I don't think that's the way he talks. But
it really planted a deep seed in me.
That sounded more like of a Joey Tribbiani.
No, that's how you doing. But he really did. He really, it struck deep in me what he said, and I carried that with me the whole time that we had planned on possibly quitting.
Right. And
I'm like, you know what? You're never going to do it unless you jump.
Yep.
And if nobody's ever seen, and I'll try to find the link to that video, the Steve Harvey jump video.
Yep.
But Steve Harvey was talking to his audience on Family Feud one day about jumping, about you're never going to know the true taste of success until you jump. And you're going to fall and you're going to hurt yourself. You got to pick yourself back up again, and you got to jump.
Well, and let's go back just over the summer before you turned in your paperwork. We had gotten to the point where we couldn't keep up with cooking Chris's dishes and the weekly chat and everything else. And so what we ended up doing at that point was cutting the schedule, like almost like the taping schedule, because your work schedule started to get completely out of control because we didn't know.
That's what ultimately sped up the timeline and made me go to October 1, because I had this job that was second shift with weekends off, and then all of a sudden management started getting cut, and a lot of those managers came from the dispatch center. So we had managers coming back into the office, which means and those people had more seniority than me, so it kept bumping me down. So I went from this weekend off job to another job. I think it had Sunday, Monday off, and I started training on it, and then right before I got fully qualified and legal to work on it, I got bumped off of it. Right. So it was a huge bumping game to where I never knew what my days off were going to be. I had to notify the folks at church and tell them I can't lead worship right now because I don't know when I'm going to be working.
Everything was getting like cut to the quick. And so when we could do something on the YouTube channel, we shifted mainly to live content because that content wasn't as popular as the cooking show and that kind of stuff, because a lot of that was more fun if you were participating when it was live than
it's more of a social thing than
and so our channel kind of stagnated a little bit from a standpoint of where we had envisioned for it, because we couldn't produce the content and edit the content that the majority of the Crock Posse was enjoying. So we were kind of trying to do what we could while we could. You weren't getting to do any kind of worship.
And that was killing me.
And our family time just went out the window because your schedule went completely berserk and nobody knew when you were working, when you weren't working, and it just was not.
And it was changing almost weekly.
Well, and we were hanging on for something that we knew in the end we didn't want.
Yeah.
So
if I had stayed, ultimately I would be back on an extra board for at least 5 years.
Well, and that was the other thing, is going back to the absolute uncertainty of never knowing any time, and there was no light at the end of that tunnel. And to add to that, all the turmoil, all the rumors, all the chaos. And we finally just said, you know what? It's time to jump off of the merry-go-round.
So I signed paperwork, and I wasn't keeping it a secret. That I said I'm not moving to Jacksonville. And then there was a part of me, and I did. I backpedaled on it, and I'm like, well, maybe I will go to Jacksonville. And then I caught flack for that because like, oh, I thought you weren't going to Jacksonville. Like, you know what? Whatever I do, I'm going to do it in the best interest of my family, my wife and my kid. Everything else, including the channel, everything can be put on hold as long as I'm taking care of my wife and my kid.
Right.
And so I was allowed to change my mind because it didn't affect them. It was all about me and you and Ad. And then that even made me more mad that I was backpedaling on something. So then we finally did. We said, nope, we're done. So I remember signing the paperwork. Or it was an online thing, but it was sent to my supervisor, and I clicked send. Then I got up, and I went into his office. And I will keep this PG. I will keep this rated G, but are you effing kidding me? That's what my boss said, because he could not believe that I was actually going to, one, I was good at what I did. I was someone that he did not have to watch.
Right.
I just did my job, did it well, and that was the end of that. And the other part was nobody quits the railroad. The railroad is like Fight Club. You talk about it in Fight Club, but you don't talk about it outside of Fight Club, and you don't get out. It was like everybody gets Stockholm syndrome. And I was even told early on, because when I first started on the railroad, I was there for about a year, and I thought, I think I want to try and be a cop again. And I remember telling an old heads, by the way.
I don't recall you telling me that, but go ahead.
With Brown, we talked, because I was for Brownsburg a long time ago. Wow. But a railroad term, when you say old head, that means a very old, seasoned railroader with a lot of years. And this old head conductor said, how long you been for the railroad? And I said, I've been here for a little over a year. He goes, no, you're done. Like, what are you talking about? He goes, once you've been here for a year, you're unless you get fired, you're in for life. That's just the way it is with the railroad, because you're not good at, you can't do anything else.
Now, to be fair to his wisdom, the railroad has changed a lot since then.
It's in 17 years, I've never seen so many changes in my life.
But that's that's
the nature of business too.
But that is the nature of business, and ultimately, even if everything had stayed the same, we were still with the intention of you leaving.
Right.
So it's not like all this happened and we had made the decision before any of these changes had taken effect, because it was not what you wanted to do for the rest of your life. It wasn't worth.
I had a good skill at it, but it wasn't my passion. It wasn't
worth spending the years of your life doing something that you genuinely did not like, when we had an option to try something else. And so we were already headed down that path. And if you had told me back when we made that decision that all these changes were going to happen to the railroad, and I mean, there were lots of changes that we're not even talking about, I would have laughed in your face. Because things had been, while not the same the whole time, they had been so steady to even imagine. I could not have even creatively come up with all the things that ended up happening. Yeah. But it boils down to, we had already been set on a course. So it wasn't too out of the picture for us to speed things up.
Right.
We found other alternatives.
I'm glad it did, really.
Yeah, and it ended up being one of those things that we we went from hey, we went from we're on this trajectory, we're trying, and in June, or you stopped chewing in February.
Stopped chewing in February. We went low carb in June.
Yes. And to those of you who are listening from the website is not a low carb website.
Right.
You will find low carb recipes on there. Aunt Lou is bringing you the sugar and the starch.
Let's just say that Aunt Lou is a sugar saint.
She's like, I can cover this for you guys. Yep. And so, but if you want some lower carb recipes, we do have a whole section on the website. We don't ever try to impose what we're doing on everybody.
Never. No.
We do. Every recipe that you find on the site has been cooked by either me, Aunt Lou, or Mikey.
Yeah.
And tested by our families and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But there's years of recipes on there.
Right. And like I said, I gained like 70 pounds in the course of a year from doing this.
Right.
So we had to make a change. And
well, and so
we
we ended up doing that. And then come October, you were quitting your job.
October. You know, and here's the irony of my last day. I had refused overtime I don't think I'd worked a day's overtime in over a year because we had
too much
too much going on. There was no way because if I took a day overtime, that was going to take our family day away. Right. Or our day of church
taping
away. So there was no time in the schedule for overtime. And I had just enough personal time saved up. I'd taken all my vacation from last year, but I had just enough personal time saved up where I had to work like 2 days in that week, and then I was completely done. The rest was burnt in personal days, and I was gone. Mm-hmm. And I was off on that Saturday, and I was like 1 day shy. I had to work 1 day is what it was. I had to work 1 day shy of having a full week off with my personal days to be done. And the guy who did our schedules, he texted me on a Saturday, which was my day off, and then I was going to go in on Sunday, and that was my day, and then I was done. And he texted me, he says, hey, I'm kind of short today. And he goes, I know you don't like overtime. And you have made that completely clear over the past year or two. You don't work overtime. But I'm short somebody and I can't fill a job. And you can't not fill a job with the railroad, especially in dispatching, because you don't have dispatchers, you don't run trains. And Brian, the guy who did our books, I love the guy, and he knew my stance on overtime that, I better be the absolute last resort. And I was. And he said, but I could really use you today. And I went to Cris and I said, hey, Brian needs me. And this would absolutely be my last. I promise you I'll never do it again. But Brian could use me. And then it hit me. And then as it hits me, he texts me back and says, wait a minute. You've got personal days the rest of this week. If you work overtime today, you have just enough time that you never have to come back in again. So my last day of work was overtime. And then I quit. And I worked that day. I dressed up in a cow suit.
Yes, you did.
And now remember, this is a semi-professional working environment where you're supposed to be professional on the radio. You're monitored by the government. You've got rules and regulations. I walked in a cow suit with a cowboy hat and cowboy boots because this cowboy was on his last ride with the railroad.
Holy cow, Mikey quit his job.
And that's exactly what happened. After that day, I shook hands, I gave hugs, I waved, and I moseyed on out of the railroad. I quit.
Yes. And then you went to work for the real tyrant.
And I did. I did. But this is something that we'd invested as a family, had invested 17 years in.
Right.
And not to say that I left without apprehension, because again, we left a lot of security there on the table, but I don't miss it. I thought I would. I thought there would have been something to where I'd have been like, man, I'm so good at moving trains, or, and the folks that I worked with, both in the office and then the folks out in the field, I'd grown some great relationships with them as well. But the job itself, I can stay in contact with the people I really want to, but the job itself, I don't miss it one bit. It was one of those where I knew it wasn't for me to do anymore, and it allowed for us to create. And it's been, as of now, it's been 3 months exactly. That's right. It's been 3 months since I quit, and it's one of the greatest decisions I think we've ever made.
Yes.
And which leads us to here, what we're doing now. And I'm okay with it.
You're okay with what we're doing now?
I'm okay. I've been giving it a lot of thought here lately. But
I was going to say, we went from October 1, you quitting your job, to by the end of November, us taking things completely on the road.
yeah. Oh, people thought I was nuts because in the last 2 weeks of me working for the railroad, the word got out, Mikey was quitting the railroad. And I mean, family.
Oh, yeah.
Friends, coworkers, everybody was like, you are absolutely nuts. Yes. One, we all haven't moved yet because they moved the timeline so you could stay working.
Right.
And I even, one of the union guys came and says, I just heard rumor that they're going to push that again. So if you want to stay, you could pull your resignation letter.
Yep.
And I'm like, no, I don't think I'm going to.
No. The emotional energy that it took to maintain the railroad job with where we knew we wanted to go, it just was not, it did not make sense. Yeah. I know to everyone else in the world it did not make sense to just leave that, but to us it just got to the point where it was emotional, from an emotional energy standpoint, it was too expensive to stay.
Yeah. Well, and it was sucking the life out of us too.
Right.
Because
that's what I mean.
Our motto, if you haven't figured it out by now, is speak life.
Yes.
And that's what we know that's what we are called to do, is to speak life into each other as well as into other people. And then I would sit down at the desk at the railroad and would throw that out the door, because you'd have to talk rough and mean, and then you get agitated by things that didn't go your way, and I wasn't speaking life, and it was absolutely sucking the life out of me. And I'm not saying it does that to everybody, but it wasn't the fit for me.
Right.
In my journey. And I knew I could flourish under you, because, you do a pretty good job of speaking life 24/7. So.
Not all the time.
24/6 and a half. But people said I was crazy for quitting. They couldn't believe it. Again, I think stupid actually was a word that came up. Don't tell me I'm stupid, or I'll make sure and go through with it. And so I just flat out.
I think it boils down to, like, I think sometimes just as a couple that oftentimes makes decisions that people don't understand, it scares people when you're like, nope, I'm done.
When you do something that is not the norm to do,
yes,
other people become appalled. They might not have any investment in what you're about to do, but it's not what they would do. And if it's something that they wouldn't do, they feel like they have to tell you what you shouldn't do, because it's not what they would do.
And you know what?
So guess what? We did it.
Yeah, that's all right. Because ultimately, we have to live with our decisions. And, that's not to say that it's going to be an easy road by any means. It's going okay right now. But also, I don't like living in the world of regret. So again, it's kind of like everything else that we've kind of ever jumped out and done. It's like, I don't think that it's not going to have bumps, but I have faith that we will dig in and figure out, like, if we need to take a detour somewhere with wherever we're going with whatever we're doing, we can adjust as we go. I have faith in us. And so that doesn't bother me so much, I guess. And you know what? It really doesn't have any bearing on anyone else. I mean, other than the people that, who are a part of what we're doing online,
Right.
like that means they get to see you more. So
Right.
whenever you finally, we're done with the railroad and then we shift. And so we try to go back to our produced content.
Right.
But again,
But even before we did that, people were calling us nuts because I quit my job
right.
the same week that I quit my job, or right before my resignation. We buy a new truck, newer to us truck. We buy
we did do that before you
and
left. Oh, because
you were in the camper whenever I got the text for overtime.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
We bought the truck and the
we
RV.
We just kind of really went crazy. Because we decided, okay, here's the other thing is, like, there was a major mind shift because our entire railroad career / marriage, that period of time, which was the bulk of it, we could not plan to go out with friends. We could not like say, okay, we're going to go to fireworks on the 4th of July, or we could not even there were only a handful of holidays that you were able to fully be present at, because even if we could work it so that you could be there for Christmas morning, usually we had to work it quickly so you could leave and go back to work
Yeah.
because the railroad never stops. And so we had always lived our lives kind of chained to the railroad and chained to what was possible. And so very quickly, within the period of time where we knew you were going to quit until you actually did quit, we realized that the chains were completely off. Like, we did not have to plan vacations and everything around someone else's schedule. We did not have to do a lot of things. And at the same time, we were also looking at, okay, how do we, what kind of things do we want to do for Addie? Mm-hmm. Like, what kind of things do we want to, what kind of experiences do we want to bring for her? And then also, how does that work into what we're doing professionally, from the channel to the website and all that kind of stuff of, you know, if we thought a little bit bigger, what would this look like? And so we started thinking really, really big, and we made some really big decisions. And that was, we traded in your truck for a different truck. And then we also
bought a house on wheels.
Bought the RV for a lot of reasons. One, so that when we were traveling, we could still do a lot of the cooking that was required for the website. But then also, we had really started to fall in love with the idea of traveling and showing. Now that everything we did, we could do online, we fell in love with the idea of traveling and adding travel to the website and to the YouTube channel. And that could be a way to kind of really add a whole nother layer of content and stuff like that. But people thought we had, and they still do. Let's be really clear. Like, a lot of people don't understand what it is we're doing.
And if you're one of those people,
we
it's
love
okay.
you.
We love you, and we hope we can still speak
It's
life
okay.
into you.
But I think ultimately, we set timelines, adjusted timelines, and all that. So we went in October on our first trip to Illinois, and
Like a test run.
kind of a test run to kind of like understand how producing content would work, how if we
how to hold a camera while hiking, and
well, not only that, and then also like how an RV camper works, and is this something we could even begin to imagine ourselves really doing on a regular basis to kind of take our audience along with us as we are doing all kinds of stuff. And we fell head over heels for all of it. I would say from like a behind the scenes standpoint, like I fell in love with the fact that I didn't have to kill myself trying to produce all this content before I went somewhere and then come home and kill myself producing content the entire time to like make up for that little sliver of time where I was away. I like the fact that I could cook and photograph and work on my website, on the side of when we were doing the travel stuff, but that it didn't create this massive hole of what all we needed to do professionally.
Right.
Like that was like a big key factor for me. And it was very different than any other time we had ever traveled to do anything professional or not. Like I could even go away to conferences or we would go away on our business trip or whatever. And I'd still have to like just work my tail end off before and after, and it just was not optimal. And having this traveling kitchen with me like totally was a game changer. Like it made it so I could do the things and test the recipes that I needed to and do the other things I needed to on location wherever I was, and it was right there with me.
Yep.
So, but that's not even what you see on the channel or what you see on the blog. I mean, that's just in the background. And then I think from just a standpoint of the freedom of, we use the hashtag on Instagram, home is where you park it.
Yep.
Like we could go anywhere and do and see things like Addie was learning about Native Americans. At the time we were in and different tribes of Native Americans, and then we took her on the hike for Indian Kitchen and to show her like a real life example of how
they process their food,
how an example of what a Native American tribe would do to feed their family and those kinds of things.
And then Millstone Bluff,
and we got to show her all kinds of stuff that kind of like just added layers to all those things and helped her kind of visualize it and bring all that to life. And she fell in love with it and
retained it.
Oh yeah. And so, it just became like life went from black and white to full color that week, I think.
Well, I remember when we left and we're on our way home and it was like church, what'd you think?
Yeah.
But this time I didn't go, it was okay. But in my head I was screaming it. We were both like, this is the greatest thing ever. This is so much fun.
Right.
We get to travel and we're working at the same time. We were working.
Oh.
If we weren't filming, we were editing. We were
right.
Filming dishes and stuff like that. But it was like,
I think I blew through my entire data plan. This was before I upgraded my data plan, but I blew through my entire data plan in that week.
Yep.
For that month. Because I was working and I was getting, but it was like, and so clearly I upgraded my data plan and that's okay now. But I was just like, oh, wow. But no, it made everything possible. And it was just an eye-opening experience. And so very quickly we started realizing, because originally when we purchased the trailer, the idea was that this coming summer, we would take an old-fashioned camping out west trip.
Yeah.
Like I went on as a child with my family.
Which we're going to get to that in the next episode.
Right. But because
it's a secret.
That was the plan.
Yeah.
And the Illinois trip in the fall was just for us to get our feet wet.
Right.
Well, our feet got soaked because we were like, you know what? We could go here coming up between Christmas and or between
Thanksgiving
and Christmas, and we could go check out some areas in Texas that we had wanted to visit.
Yep.
And so you know what? We don't have no chains.
No chains, yeah.
And so we took off.
Yep.
And that's, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you're starting to see that kind of content.
Yep.
You're seeing both.
It's coming out
cooking,
now where that's
yeah.
the well, we busted our tail there the month before.
Sure.
Because we still had to put out content on the channel from our kitchen.
There was lots of planning.
And I remember looking at the calendar and thinking it was just the impossible.
Right, but we got it.
Because you came up with an entire month's worth of content.
Right.
Which was, 16 episodes?
Because for those of you that don't know, in the food blog world, the months of November and December are our biggest months. That's when most people come to
That's our peak season.
websites to get recipes for the holidays and then just in general. And so the idea that we were going to take off and try a whole new adventure in the middle of that peak season, we could totally do it. Again, I had a mobile office with me the entire time. But we also had to get a lot of work done in your first month on the job.
Oh, yeah.
So that we had to get all that work done so that we could free ourselves up enough to be able to do what we needed to do while we were traveling. And so we worked really hard in October, but at the same time, while we were gone, we were able to continue at a good pace.
Yeah.
And produce content. And honestly, content came really easy when we were traveling.
The filming schedule previous to that was it was daunting.
Intense.
We did get it done, and we marathon taped. I even had an eye thing, so you jumped in behind the camera, in front of the camera, and
he got an eye infection in the middle of all of it, and it was
didn't need that.
You can't be on camera. So
it wasn't pink eye, by the way.
No, it wasn't.
But Aunt Lou came up and she taped a bunch of episodes with me, and then I had this. I wanted to get all the videos done before we went to Texas, and so I edited up to, I think, the day before, and got everything finally uploaded, and
which was a little less crazy than before because that was your full-time job. But
I was cranking them out, man.
It was an intense schedule, and that's a lot of what was going on, and that's a little bit why we ended up not doing as many lives.
Yep, but
and that kind of thing.
It was great, because it was fun.
Yeah,
and beyond. I mean, you can't just have fun for a living. I mean, I'm sure you can, but I need to retract that because we are, but. Yeah. When I say that is, if you could find your passion, and again, this is Steve Harvey talking, if your passion, you've got to be good at it, I think is something really needs, but if you find your fire in detailing cars, mowing yards, washing windows,
cooking with a crock pot,
playing your guitar, sewing, craft work, whatever it is that you do, if that is your passion and you can hone yourself into it, why not? And that's where we're at, is we've got this incredible website, recipesthatcrock.com, that is your passion.
Right.
And because you're so good at writing. And then when people come to you with questions or comments or, praises or even not so nice things, how to engage with them in a way that makes them feel welcome to a virtual table like we're having here, or to mind their manners or everything. But either way, any way you do it, you speak life into them. And to me, that is my passion, whether it's playing guitar for y'all or at church or cooking in a crock pot or an Instant Pot or an air fryer. I am the gadget guy. But to fall in love with what you're doing, and show that joy to those that are watching or listening, that's where we're at now. Is we found our passion, we found our ministry, we found each other again through it, and I wouldn't trade this job for the world.
Well, that's fact, good.
I had circling back one last time to the railroad, working to live and living to work and all that. The guy that took over the railroad, He passed away recently. He was not very well liked by a lot of people in craft. And I was asked by one of the guys, hey, now that this guy's gone, would you take your job back? I wasn't fired from my job. I quit my job. And I did not quit my job because of any certain one person. I quit my job because it wasn't my passion.
Right.
And I happily told him I wouldn't take that job back if they gave me his salary, because it definitely wasn't about the money. It was about falling in love with what I did.
Right.
And and here's where I hit the jackpot, y'all. This is where I'm going to brag a little bit about life. When you can fall in love with your job and do it with the person you fell in love with, that's living. Oh, I should save that for the very end of the podcast, like the end of the season. But I'll say it again later. But when you can do that, then you're living the good life. Oh, you see what I did there?
I saw what you did there.
That was good stuff.
My goodness, you're smoozing the new boss, aren't you?
But we'll come back with another episode. I think we might be able to squeeze at least one, maybe two more episodes out of this story. We're getting really towards the end of it now.
Yes.
But we'll come back again with another one talking about what we're doing now and where we go from here.
Right.
And we'll do that in the next episode. But right now, I think it's time to thank some folks like, well, you, the author and creator of recipesthatcrock.com, my beautiful wife's cooking blog, where you can find a whole bunch of different recipes. I'd say if we counted it up now, it's right about 1,000 different recipes that you could choose from, whether it's meats or chicken or
chicken
seafood.
Is meat, honey.
Well, I'm sorry, beef or pork or chicken, or there's even cheesecake. You can make cheesecake in a crock pot.
And it's pretty awesome.
And it's really good. Also, we want to thank our patrons over at patreon.com/recipesthatcrock. You're the one that bought the microphones. You're the one that is helping us to do all this. It's because of your support that we're able to keep the lights on, especially the big ring light that's making my pretty face illuminated. Yours too. And we also want to invite you that if you want to become a bigger part of this and you want to support what we're doing over at Patreon, again, we invite you to go to recipesthatcrock.com, get yourself some dinner, and then sit down and go to patreon.com/recipesthatcrock, and you'll find different ways to support us.
And if you are watching this on YouTube and you want to skip ahead to the last episode of this season, you can listen to the audio file at the link down below in the description. And you can also catch up on all the previous episodes.
Yep.
Or you can tune in next week for the conclusion of season 1 of the podcast.
Season 1, episode 9. We thought we were going to do 10.
I thought this was 9.
No, this was 8.
Oh, Lordy.
Yeah.
I've messed it all up.
Well, just like the railroad timeline got sped up, we got sped up, and we were so excited to get to where we are now. We got here. So
we're here.
Looks like there's going to be 9 episodes. Who knows? We might be able to squeeze out 10, but we'll definitely have 9 episodes for you. And
the prologue is also, so technically it is 10 episodes, but numbered to 9.
No.
Oh, goodness.
The prologue was episode 1.
Oh, my goodness. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I told you math is not my strong suit.
No, but you're a real good cook now. No, but you're a real good cook. You're just a real good cook. Sorry, I peeked out there on the mic. I think that's where we should end it, especially me. So we'll check you out next time. Cue the music.